It was the kind of spring evening that didn't make a grand entrance. No thunderclap, no golden hour theatrics, just a subtle shift in the air. The kind of evening where the world seemed to pause, suspended in the breath between daylight and darkness, waiting for something to stir. Inside the house, time felt slower, almost fragile. Each tick of the old mantel clock echoed like a whisper in a cathedral. A single candle flickered on the coffee table, its flame dancing softly, casting gold against the walls. I hadn't lit it for light. I had plenty of lamps, but rather for the ritual of it. The comfort of routine. The illusion of control. The television droned in the background, a black and white film that had long lost its plot in my memory. I wasn't watching it. Not really. My gaze floated, unfocused, and my fingers curled around a chipped mug filled with lukewarm tea. I was cocooned beneath a throw blanket, the familiar hum of solitude keeping me company. 6 years had passed since the divorce, but they hadn't rushed. They had moved in quiet, deliberate steps. Days stitched together with garden soil, volunteer shifts at the antique shop, and slow mornings on the porch wrapped in my mother's shawl. Silence had stopped being a void to fill and become a texture I wore easily. A peaceful, predictable rhythm. Until that night, it was the softest of sounds, a creak, more felt than heard. My heart didn't leap, but it turned its head, curious. I looked toward the front door and noticed it was slightly ajar. The porch light, struggling through the drizzle, cast a blurry silhouette framed by the downpour. I stood, my heart suddenly attuned. Noah. Even as I said it, I questioned myself. A memory summoned out of the blue, surely. But no, there he was. Noah Spencer, my daughter's college friend, the one who used to bounce on his heels and call me Miss Evelyn with theatrical respect, his grin always on the edge of apology. He had visited during holidays, left jackets draped over dining chairs, and filled the house with youthful chatter that vanished with her graduation. Now he stood before me, soaked to the bone, the porch light casting raindrops like stars on his shoulders. Older, taller, more grounded in his body. The nervous boy was gone, but the eyes, their kindness, their quiet observance remained. I knocked, he said gently, as if speaking too loud might break the moment. Your porch light's flickering. Thought maybe you hadn't noticed. I hesitated, the years folding between us like pages. And then I stepped aside.
Come in.
You'll catch your death out there. He entered with a shiver and a smile, and for a moment we just stood in the hallway, suspended in a quiet that wasn't awkward, but unfamiliar. I handed him a towel. He rubbed his hair, glancing around. It looks the same, he said. You still have that quilt on the armchair. I laughed softly. Some things don't change. But we both knew some things to do. We settled into the living room, tea warming in our hands and memories trickling back with surprising ease. He told me about Colorado, about mountain air and freelance design work and late-night drives. I told him about the garden and the volunteers at the shop, and how I couldn't seem to get my roses to bloom evenly. Our words tiptoed through the space between us, warming the room more than the tea ever could. There was no urgency, only a kind of leaning and a curiosity that hadn't aged with time. And then it happened. A small thing. His fingers brushed mine as he reached for his mug. It should have been nothing. A passing touch. But it lingered. His eyes lifted to meet mine, steady and searching, not invasive, not brash, but honest. The kind of look that asks, "Are you still in there?" And somehow I was. Evelyn. The woman who once laughed too loud and danced barefoot in the kitchen. Evelyn, who had packed that self away in boxes labeled practical and mature after the divorce. She blinked awake beneath the candlelight, unsure but alive. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a ripple, the first of many. It was 2 nights later when he returned, just as the rain began to tap gently against the windows like a memory wanting in. I heard the knock before I saw his silhouette through the amber glass of the door. A familiar shape that somehow still made my breath catch. This time, he brought a brown paper bag holding his mother's rosemary bread, its scent already escaping in warm, earthy wisps. "Smells like soup in there," he said, stepping inside with that easy grin, the one that momentarily made me forget I hadn't bothered with lipstick or even brushed out my hair fully. I laughed. A quiet, surprised sound. "Lentil and thyme. Leftover from yesterday," I said, taking the bag from him, fingers brushing. He followed me into the kitchen where we sat by the window, the one I usually reserved for solitary meals, where the city lights outside had become my only dinner companions. But that evening, the chair across from me wasn't empty, and neither was the space I'd grown used to protecting. Our conversation flowed again, like an old melody remembered. But this time, it went deeper, dipping into quieter parts of me. He asked about my dreams, not the ones I'd already chased, but the ones I still clutched silently like fragile glass. "What place have you never been?" he asked, but always wanted to see. "A small town on the coast of Maine," I said, picturing weathered boats and fog in the morning, salty air and silence that didn't feel lonely. "There's this lighthouse there, whitewashed and a little chipped. I always imagined standing there at dusk." He tilted his head, smiling softly. "You've got this way of talking," he said. "It slows everything down, like I'm listening to the inside of a story, not just the outside." His words didn't flirt. They didn't promise. But they noticed, and that felt rarer than romance. Later, in the living room, the jazz station played something low and moody, the kind of song that curled around you like a shawl. He lingered near the mantel, where old photographs stood like silent witnesses to who I used to be. His eyes paused at one in particular, me and my ex-husband, caught in a laugh long before laughter felt like work. There was silence. Not awkward, just honest. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Being with someone?" I could have given him something to rehearse. I could have shrugged it off. But there was something about Noah's voice, steady, unhurried, that made the truth feel safe. "I miss the presence," I said after a moment. Not pretending. Not being invisible. He turned then, really looked at me, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with something quieter. Respect, maybe. Or understanding. His gaze didn't waver. Didn't search for something easier. "I don't think anyone could ever overlook you," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Just words. Simple. But somehow, they found the places that had been aching the longest. Saturday arrived too quickly, the kind of day that sneaks up on you when your heart is tangled in questions with no easy answers. The house felt unusually still that morning, as if it, too, were holding its breath. I moved through the hours in a kind of haze, brushing past furniture, half-heartedly tending to the plants. Reheating coffee I didn't really want. I told myself I wasn't waiting for anything, but I was. I was waiting for him. By noon, I knew I couldn't spend another minute suspended in this fog. I went into the kitchen and reached for the old ceramic mixing bowl, the one with tiny cracks like veins running through it. It belonged to my mother. I hadn't used it in years. As I juiced the lemons and creamed the butter, something softened inside me. The sharp citrus scent filled the air, mixing with the sound of the oven preheating, and for a moment, I was someone I hadn't been in a long time. The woman who used to bake when friends came by, who welcomed people in with warmth and open hands. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, he stood there, uncertain. His eyes searched mine. "I wasn't sure if I should come," he said. "Didn't want to overstep." "You didn't," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're right on time." We sat across from each other at the old wooden table, the lemon cake cooling on a plate between us. Neither of us reached for it. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt more like a conversation we didn't need words for. We let it linger, like a fragile string suspended between us. Finally, he spoke. "I don't know what this is," he said, his eyes fixed on a crack in the table's varnish. "But I haven't felt this seen in a long time." I looked at him, then not just glanced, but really looked. Past the uncertainty, past the cautious smile. I saw someone else there. Someone quietly brave. Someone who had been holding back his truth for far too long. "Me neither," I said. And in that moment, it wasn't just an admission. It was a surrender. His hand moved toward mine, not quickly, not nervously, but with the kind of intention that says, "I've been waiting for this." When our fingers touched, it wasn't fireworks or melodrama. It was something quieter, deeper, like coming home after a long, cold journey. He left town the next day. I watched him drive away from the window, arms folded across my chest. But I wasn't empty. I wasn't left behind. Something had shifted. The silence that had haunted this house for years no longer echoed. It hummed now, gently, as if the walls knew something had begun. A week passed. I returned to my routines, but everything felt different, brighter. Even the way I folded laundry seemed to carry a kind of presence. I found myself checking my phone more often, though I didn't admit it to anyone. Then one evening, just as the sky turned a soft gray-purple, a message arrived. "Made it back. Been thinking about you. Can I call tonight?" I stared at it for a moment, heart catching in my throat, before typing, "Yes, please." That night, we talked for hours. His voice was softer over the phone, but it carried weight, familiarity. He told me the moment on the couch when our hands had brushed had stayed with him. "I didn't want to look away," he said. It felt real, safe. Something in me melted, because I had felt the same. The days that followed were slow and tender, a quiet unraveling. Messages throughout the day were sometimes long, sometimes just a photo of his dog sleeping with its paws stretched out like it owned the world. Sometimes a line of poetry, sometimes just thinking of you. There was no rush, no declarations, just presence. One Friday morning, as I sipped coffee from my favorite chipped mug, another message came in. "I want to see you again, not just for a visit. Can I come for the weekend?" I read it twice, then again. My heart thudded in my chest, not with panic, but with anticipation. I wrote back, "The door is open." And this time, I knew I wasn't baking lemon cake for a memory. I was baking it for the future. When Noah arrived that Friday afternoon, time didn't feel like a thief anymore. There was no race against the clock, no anxious glances at the minutes slipping by. Just presence. Just him. Just me. We moved around my small kitchen like we'd done it 100 times before, as if the scent of garlic on our fingers and the simmer of sauce on the stove had always been our shared language. There were pauses between words that didn't need filling. The silence wasn't empty. It was safe. Later, we strolled down to the lake, the sky painted in muted golds and pinks. The water mirrored the evening like it was holding its breath with us. We didn't say much. Sometimes he'd gently brush his hand against mine, not quite holding it, just letting me know it was an invitation, not a demand. We ended the night tangled in laughter, watching old movies we both loved and quoting the lines before they were spoken. His head tilted back in laughter at the exact moments mine did, and I noticed how easily joy lived in his face. It made something loosen in me, something I didn't know was clenched. Then came Saturday night. We sat wrapped in a worn blanket under the stars, a mug of tea cooling beside us. My porch light buzzed in the distance, but out here in the dark, it felt like the universe had quieted for us. There was a pause. A real one, and I felt something rise in my chest that had waited years to be heard. "I used to think," I said, voice barely above a whisper, "that I had to be less to be loved. Less complicated. Less older. Less everything." He turned to me, not startled, not rushing to fix. Just there. His presence said, "I can hold this with you." He shook his head slowly, as if every movement needed to carry the truth gently. "You're more real than anyone I've known," he said. "And that's exactly why I'm here." And it landed not as a romantic line in a story, but as something earned, something my heart recognized as true. We didn't exchange declarations. There were no promises sealed in urgency. Just space. Space to be exactly who we were. To breathe fully. To trust the silence. To stay even in the uncertainty. On Sunday, when he packed up to leave, we didn't make a big deal of it. He hugged me longer than usual. He smiled. That soft kind of smile that says I'll see you again, without needing to be loud about it. And then he drove off into the afternoon light. But it wasn't goodbye. It was something quieter, something gentler, a beginning, written not in bold declarations, but in the slow unfolding of trust. Noah's visit wasn't just a flicker in a long stretch of dark. It was a lantern, a soft, steady glow that illuminated a path I'd quietly boarded up, telling myself I was too late for it. That love had passed me by. But I was wrong. Love hadn't forgotten me. It hadn't abandoned me. It was just waiting. Waiting for me to come home to myself. Waiting for me to stop shrinking. And now, I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding behind who I think I should be. This time, I am ready.